This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of bow tag here. Bring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I get home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey, man. What's that? Yeah, I know you've watched Alien Romulus, and you're gonna leave me a voice note, but I'm dying with the flu at the minute, so I thought it might be a good opportunity to drop some listener voice notes in, and then you just give your thoughts and respond to their thoughts as well. And if I do feel well, then I might come in later. At the moment, I'm battling a hell of a cold. So just to be clear, I'm going to send you voice notes from Graham, Tasha, and Alan in that order. And yeah, feel free to give your own thoughts and then respond to their thoughts if there's anything you want to talk about as well.
Right, so things I loved about Alien Romulus, I'll quickly rattle them off. The pacing, the sound design, and the cinematography, all just gorgeous. Things I didn't like, the final 20 minutes, there is a point in the final 20 minutes where it just starts to drag a little, and it's just, you're kind of waiting for it to end. But overall, I think it's probably it is the best Alien movie we have gotten since Aliens. And it fits nice and snug in between the first and second movie. Fede Alvarez is still proven that he is just a top writer and director. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts.
Okay, so I've just watched it. I'm gonna give you my favorite parts and parts that I didn't like so much. But I'm gonna start with the quote unquote bad parts, just because there's like not much. So I would say the fact that the entire crew were teenagers, that rubbed me the wrong way, just because it's out of touch for me. And I would assume for the majority of the fans of Aliens, they're going to be, 30s, 40s, 50s kind of thing. Maybe 60s, 70s as well. And it just, their behavior was very teenage like. And I know that, they've grown up in harsh conditions, and, that they're supposed to be a little bit more mature and rougher and tougher based on growing up in those conditions, but they still exhibited the same teenage traits of, being run wholly on their emotion only. And I know that the majority of people, like for example, the scene where they want Andy to open the door. Obviously, it's not a good idea to open the door. The distance that the alien was, the fact that the alien was clearly waiting for them to open the door, they couldn't think past their emotions, and they just wanted him to open the door so he could save his sister. Which and obviously that's something that most people would probably do, but it was just like the dialogue between them as well is very like, it was very teenage like, and it juvenile, that is the word I'm looking for, is very juvenile. And yeah, and they kind of carried the same tropes that you would have in a ragtag space crew, where you've got like that one guy who's a loudmouth and a hothead, and you've got the leader, and you've got like the fragile female role, then you've got the specialist female role, aka the pilot, and then you've got obviously the protagonist of it all. And I was just like, they managed to take those tropes and then make it so juvenile, so it kind of ruined it a little bit. But that was the only thing. And the thing is, in my opinion, the movie was so good that it didn't even matter that the dialogue between the teenagers was juvenile. It just felt like everything else was done so well. So my favorite parts, the intensity of some of the scenes, like for example, when they realized that the body temperature, if they could get the room temperature to match their body temperature, that it would make the I don't even know what those like spidery aliens are called. I forget what. Not the xenomorphs, the stage before that where they've got the spider legs and the lungs and the tail. I don't know what that's called. But those things couldn't see them and they had to walk through so many. That wasn't done in any of the other films, and it made it so I was gripping my seat. Like it was intense. It was very intense. And then the second thing, the acid scene where they were in zero gravity, and she realized that the acid won't fall down, and it worked. And oh my god, my heart was beating so fast because they did it so well. They did it so well. What else? And also one thing that's just a bit of a side note, not really a like or dislike. I felt like the scene where um the pregnant girl, I don't remember her name, she was giving birth essentially to her like hijacked fetus. And it felt like, I'm watching it as a woman as well. It felt like it was representative of when a woman has been sexually assaulted and she's become pregnant and has to give birth. That's all I could think of the whole time. I'm sorry if this is too long, by the way, but there's quite a few thoughts. I probably do have some more thoughts, but that's all I can think of right now. So let me know what you thought.
Hey, Cinema Callback. I just watched Alien Romulus, and I have to say, I love the atmosphere and how true the design stayed to the original movie. You can see how much respect Fede Alvarez has for the first two movies. I also love the nods to Prometheus because it's a movie I like, and I've watched it a good few times. For some of the things I disliked, I would have to say some of the callbacks were a bit too on the nose, especially the line, "Get away from her, you bitch." It made my screening laugh, which kind of takes you out of it a bit. Also, maybe I'm a bit off on this, but the speed at which the aliens mature seems to have increased like crazy. I think it was inconvenient when I first felt like there was no time between the aliens being born and then being fully matured. It just seems like it took a little bit longer in Alien, but maybe I'm trying to put like a human restriction on something alien, so anyway, thank you.
Hey man, sorry to hear you're in such bad shape. Really sound like you're in death's door there. Yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear your thoughts on Alien Romulus. I'm watching this now on the small screen. Watched it last night. I know you watched it in the cinema, which I guess was 4 months ago or something, quite a while ago. So it's very fresh in my head, but I'm not sure how much you're going to remember the little details of it. But really great to hear from some of our listeners there. Nice to hear the thoughts of Graham, Tasha, and Alan there. I'll just respond to some of the points they've made because I think a lot of it connects with my own viewing experience. So first there we had Graham, who said that he really liked the pacing, the sound design, and the cinematography. I agree. So I'll just say I think the general sentiment from people is that, or at least from those messages, I'm not sure how well it's been received in general by kind of the world at large, but certainly in those voice messages there, people seem to think that it was an excellent movie and one of the best Alien movies. I agree. I think this is, for me, easily the third best Alien movie. I mean, well, there could be recency bias. There could be, it's very cutting edge, like it's very now. Some of the movies, like Alien Resurrection, for example, feel very dated watching it now, whereas this obviously doesn't feel dated. It's brand new. But even when you watch like a lot of like the MCU movies and stuff, they already feel a bit hokey. Like this feels on a kind of effects level and on a visual level, it's not cheesy, it's not camp, it's very seriously put together, and the pacing is fantastic for the most part. Certainly the first act, I mean, the way that they get you into this movie is so captivating. It's one of the best beginnings to an Alien movie. I mean, there's, now I say that, I'm kind of saying that without actually thinking about the beginnings of the other Alien movies, just because I was so impressed by how this movie starts. But I suppose if I do retrace my steps, Alien 3, for all its flaws, does have that great opening on the beach. But this movie, just the way, for starters, it's the only time I can think of where we see like a real proper society, like a terrestrial society, not, some space station or something. Well, I guess Alien 3 is kind of a society, but that's what, like 20 people or something. This is like a giant mining planet city type situation. And how they get you in, for starters, is that opening kind of pre-credits flashback, if you will, of them recovering the alien fossil or whatever and starting their experiments. And then it goes to the present day with Kaylee Spaney. Is that how you say her name? I think she's fantastic, but I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her name. Her and the star of the show, David Johnson, who I think delivers the best android performance or synthetic performance that the franchise has ever seen. And obviously there's very, very tough competition for that. But I think he just absolutely kills it. Yeah, it's them, and they're on their the stakes of that mining situation and her credits that she feels like she's accumulated enough, but then the company has said, no, sorry, you're going to need to do another 6 years. And it's so delicately or so like deftly established what the stakes are, what people have lost, what situation they're in. And I realized like 10 minutes in or something, because it cuts to the chase, like they're off that planet pretty quick. I realized quite early on, I'm like, I actually give a shit about this girl and what happens to her, and I want her to succeed. That should be a given in any kind of an adventure movie, but it's actually really rare when you watch a blockbuster and you give a shit, like you care about the characters almost immediately. Like you're like, it's like we're watching some sort of cinema verite kitchen sink drama or something, where it's like, oh my God, it's heartbreaking, people living this kind of life, like, but you're watching a action effects sci-fi blockbuster. So yeah, to Graham's point about the pacing, the film gets you where like it makes total sense why they're going to that ship. It's not like, come on, we only care about aliens chasing people, so who cares why they got there? They're there. It's like, no. We're gonna just make it all feel really organic and realistic to the plot of to the stakes that we've come to know with the corporation and the passage of time and everything. Like if you've watched the 9 or so movies in this weird franchise, then this movie just, it doesn't ask anything more of you. It's not asking you to throw out a bunch of your preconceptions about the world of Alien. It's just a story that like is perfectly positioned and perfectly structured and not in an ambitious way. It's like a modest little story. It perfectly integrates with that world. So pacing, fantastic. I think he actually pushed back on the pacing in the final 20 minutes of the movie. I didn't notice that so much. So final 20 minutes, just jumping around all over the place here, but the final 20 minutes of the movie is where the prominent antagonist is this sort of Prometheus baddie, the baby that's a consequence of the injection of this new, it's almost like the like stem cell injection thing of like supercharged human. I didn't see this in cinema. You did. I think everyone kind of delivering those voice notes there, because I know you recorded those voice notes back when the movie came out, and so everyone got the pleasure or displeasure of seeing that character and that creation kind of appear unexpectedly, right? Whereas I, unfortunately, because of the way media works, and you just got to write like 100,000 clickbait articles about everything in every movie, I did see an image of that creature, character, whatever you want to call it, and so I knew somewhere in this movie there was going to be a human alien hybrid type thing. Not the first time we've seen that. Obviously, Alien Resurrection. In fact, Alien Resurrection and this movie both end almost exactly the same way, with like, now it's just the characters on a smaller little spaceship trying to get away, but in the hull of the spaceship they're fighting against a weird, grotesque human alien hybrid type thing. So I don't know if that's a deliberate callback. I kind of hope it is, because the film sort of goes out of its way to pay homage to so much, like not just the most iconic and beloved parts of the Alien franchise, but also, Prometheus and stuff. And that could be because Ridley's very heavily involved in this movie as a producer, but I certainly don't think there would be any pressure coming to Fede Alvarez to pay homage to Alien Resurrection. So it could be a coincidence, but it's funny. I love that character, that monster from Alien Resurrection, and you thought it looked terrible. But, not to say that this looks anything like that, but it's an interesting kind of echo of that. Anyway, I had that spoiled, so I knew that was coming. When I saw that article, I was like, oh, well, that'll just be, okay, now I know there's something in the who cares? There's a alien human hybrid. We've seen that kind of thing before. But as the movie went on and on and on, and that hadn't popped up, I was like, oh, this is the final, I've had like the final surprise spoiled for me in a way, which was a bit annoying. It's also the only novel thing. No, the film is very inventive and like, it's not dull, it's clever, it's smart, but it's very conservative in terms of like messing with the alien mythos. In fact, you could argue it's the most conservative of any Alien sequel. I think every other Alien sequel is taking bigger swings in terms of like deviating from what's already been established. Obviously, Cameron turned it into a big action, guns blazing movie. Alien 3, there's a lot of things they considered doing in the development of that, and then ultimately what they did make is kind of its own thing. Alien Resurrection has all of like the human cloning, splicing type stuff. Alien versus Predator, those movies are obviously different in that it's like a mashup movie. And then Prometheus is completely different, arguably not even an alien movie, but like a spin-off, and Covenant as well is just fucking bananas. So this one feels like it's the most like, we're not trying to change too much here, except for that monster at the end. So to Graham's point about like it felt it dragged a bit in the final 20 minutes. I didn't feel that personally. But yeah, I was a bit disappointed that I got that spoiled. The sound design, now this is where I think watching, and of course, one can have an incredible sound system in their own home. I think you have a really good sound system. I don't have an amazing sound setup. I mean, it's not awful, but like, I think the difference between watching films in the cinema and watching films at home is maybe most pronounced in the sound experience. And a film like this, I feel like probably the thing that I most missed out on would have been like getting to hear this movie in the cinema. Because hearing that voice note and then like hearing someone say that the sound design really blew them away, and then me kind of going, oh, I didn't even really notice the sound design. Like I can imagine the void. Same with like those Dune movies. Like I'm sure if you watch them at home on your TV, you're gonna miss out on that side of the film. On the cinematography though, I can definitely say that it's one of the best looking blockbusters I've ever seen. It's absolutely stunning. Incredible visual. I think sometimes though, like, and again, I don't know how well this movie has been received, but sometimes people only rave about the cinematography in blockbusters when they're also raving about the movie in general. So like the Denis Villeneuve movies or the Chris Nolan movies. But there's also just a thing of like visually incredible blockbusters that goes beyond just like it being a good movie. So one that comes to mind for me is the Scarlett Johansson Ghost in the Shell remake, which was like a generally quite poorly received movie, and certainly in my opinion not a great movie, but just a very kind of middle of the road fine movie. I think it's fine, but it's incredible on a visual level in my opinion. And this is another one where like I like the movie quite a lot, but I think it falls massively below the first two Alien movies, which are just like masterpieces for the ages. This is like a way above average blockbuster that's like just going to come out, if you're comparing it to like the average summer. Nowadays, all major blockbusters are sequels. So you go every year, you check out either all of them if that's your inclination or some of them, and they're generally like pretty bad. This is like a good solid movie, but it's also, I don't think this is necessarily in that conversation of like, what's your favorite Alien movie? Is it Romulus or Aliens? Now, Alien and Aliens are like, for me, on a different level. But just if we're speaking purely visually, this film it really holds its own, at least holds its own against those movies, if not is superior to them. I think there is just something about celluloid that this just could be my taste. It could be rose tinted glasses. I don't know, like nostalgia, whatever you want to call it. But I probably something being actually filmed and just the way that makes things look, the way that makes every texture and color and every visual component look, just gives, it's almost impossible for a very digital film to beat that. Like there's so many shots in Romulus that you can tell are all digital, not even just like they added something, but like that entire desk and everything in the shot is CGI. And it's a great looking movie. It's stunning. The color choices are ridiculous. Like it's so sumptuous. So many of my favorite shots in the movie don't have people in. They're just like almost like feels almost like B-roll type, just all of the visual texture and how cohesive the world is, the whole art direction. I can imagine like the conceptual stage of making this where it's like, okay, we've got the Alien and we've got the old Alien movies. I know that the Alien Isolation video game, which is again one of the peaks of the franchise, if you want to include it in the franchise, but that was a big influence. And of course, that is very influenced by Alien. And then you've also got like whatever the artists decided to bring in just for this movie. It all is just so well considered and well realized. And I looked up the cinematographer, who I'd never heard of before, Gallo Olivares. So he isn't a big name. He shot that movie Gretel and Hansel, which came out maybe 5 years ago or something, which I thought was a okay to nothingy movie that was absolutely stunning. I remember watching it and being like, this is never going to be, this isn't like The Witch or something where this is going to become like the new iconic hipster horror movie. But on a visual level, it is on a par with The Witch, Hereditary, all of those like hipster horror flicks. But it doesn't have that much else going for it beyond the visuals. But it's really nice to see now, years later, well, 5 years later, whatever it might be, this same cinematographer come back, and he hasn't done the other Fede Alvarez movies. So it's not like they he's there out of some sort of loyalty. He's been selected. This is a major, big movie, and they didn't go with someone who's like shot a bunch of blockbusters. They went with someone who, like I said, with this Gretel and Hansel movie, has shown that he's an amazing cinematographer, and he's done a bunch of music videos and stuff. I'm sure he's got plenty of other work that exhibit his quality, but to be given a kind of opportunity like this, and then to not only like smash it, but I would say exceed what I've seen from almost all cinematographers in blockbuster cinema. I'm talking Marvel, I'm talking like, that kind of the biggest stage. Like it's really exciting to see that. So yeah, cinematography, like I said, I kind of missed out on the sound design, but I like the pacing the whole way through. And yeah, that was kind of, I think Graham said in his message that it was the best Alien movie since Aliens. I think part of me feels like it's the first Alien movie since Alien Resurrection in a weird way, because like I said, Alien versus Predator and Requiem they're not alien movies, right? They're not what, like, I don't know, this is actually, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that it's not really like a sensible point to make, but it's kind of just in my head, there is a clear shape that is an alien movie, and that's bunch of people in a location, usually a spaceship or some sort of space station, remote, like they're basically remote in space in some, it's kind of arbitrary whether it's a spaceship or it's a space station or whatever, but basically they're there, they're all together as a crew, but there's also an alien presence on board, whether it's one alien or, loads of aliens, whatever it might be. And the Alien versus Predator movies aren't that. Prometheus is not that. Covenant, to be frank, I can barely remember what goes on in Covenant, but I think it's too wild and too scattershot and too like sort of philosophical and like murky in its concepts to have that clear sort of lean engine of like bunch of characters versus aliens in a small claustrophobic space. This is the first movie since Resurrection to do that. So as much as it's like the best alien movie we've had in ages, it's also like the only alien movie we've had in ages. I think Resurrection's like 97 or so. So we're talking, coming on 30 years since this franchise gave us that. We've had movies like Life, for example, that are basically an alien movie not made by, not like officially part of the franchise. But I respect like Fede Alvarez. He's probably my favorite horror director, and I kind of like what he's done here because he could have he could, I mean, I'm sure Ridley would have gone for it if he had gone, now we're going to make it, it's all, you know, we're taking it to this next mythological level, and we, you know, some stupid getting even deeper into the lore. And so, but he's like, no, let's bring this back to what's special about this franchise, because as much as there are occasional movies like Life that that sort of pay homage or try to replicate what the Alien movies did, they're also few and far between. Like, this isn't, it's not like every year we get a bunch of, you know, movies of people in a small space versus aliens, horror action type thing. So, you know, he's gone back to that, and he's made something that, if the franchise is to continue now, I think he's laid a new foundation and go, no, let's go back to this. Let's let this be what Alien movies are. So yeah, huge fan of him. Think he smashed it here. It's funny that he's like reinvigorated the Alien franchise, and he's reinvigorated the Evil Dead franchise, which is an interesting little claim to fame. Next voice message came through from Tasha there, and she mentioned that she wasn't a fan of the teen element to it. So that's actually something I liked. And when I, you know, we're getting on now, we're, you know, around 40, watching a movie now with a bunch of actors in their 20s. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, how old are these characters? Because the actors are all ranging from like maybe, I guess when it was shot, they were probably like 22 to 30 or 29 or something like that. Now, when you see someone in their 20s, let's say see a 24-year-old on screen, 99% of the time that is a teenage character, right? And if you want to make a movie about people that are 24, then you hire like 31-year-olds for that job. So Tasha's interpreted these characters as teenagers, and perhaps correctly. I'm not saying that they're not, but I, for one reason or another, didn't have that experience with this film. When I saw this movie, I was like, and I don't know why, I'm not quite sure what kind of triggered this for me, but I thought to myself, wow, this is one of the only times I've ever seen like 23, 24, 25, 26-year-olds playing adults, like actual real. I think it's because all their parents are dead and they're like employed. They're not in school. They're basically, they don't have, there's nothing separating them from adult life. They're 100% in adult life. And they are literally adults in the sense that like they're older than 18, long older than 18. So they're way younger than who would normally be the heroes in a blockbuster movie. I mean, I can, unless it's a blockbuster movie that's about teenagers, like Twilight, for example. But if it's not like a YA adaptation or something that just objectively has to be about teenagers, like Spider-Man Homecoming or something, if it's more like just this is a film about adults, you'd never have characters this young be like the whole cast. But for me watching, I was like, no, this is not. I think it's almost like a passing the torch type thing. Like these actors should be the heroes of this movie. They should be, like, I know it is a choice to make it about young people, but I thought it worked for me quite well, and it was I guess it was just so novel to see actors who look like this playing adults with adult concerns. Yeah, that I found that interesting. It was also good for me because it was like a bunch of fresh faces. Some of them I've seen a little bit, like I've seen Kaylee Spenny. It's going to take me another decade to actually be able to say her name properly, but I've seen her in a few things, but I think this was probably the most heavy lifting I've had to see her do, and I think she was really, really good. I don't think it's necessarily the easiest role to be like the kind of heroine protagonist of a movie like this, and to make you care about the character, not find the character annoying. Alien franchise has a great history of having like strong female characters, obviously mainly one strong female character, but I think just in general there's been like an opportunity there for actresses to not just be like overly sexualized and to play more interesting characters. So I think she continues in that tradition without feeling like she like has to do Ripley or whatever. So that was good. David Johnson, who my only exposure to him is the trailer for Rye Lane. So that's literally my entire knowledge of him is basically watching a trailer. And it took me a while to work out who he was, which isn't surprising considering I've only seen like 2 minutes of him in my life, but I thought he was amazing. He has a lot of interesting work to do. Not only is he not playing a human, but he's halfway through the movie switches an integral part of his kind of psychological makeup, for want of a better word. And yeah, he was fantastic. And the rest of the characters, I think there's like 3 or 4 more characters in there. The other 4 characters are much thinner, but they don't have too much dimension. But I also thought that they worked well. Like you go back to that kind of Bill Paxton, you don't necessarily need that much dimension. You just need to be doing what you're doing well. So yeah, I liked the crew. It was interesting seeing like a new slate of actors that I'm sure I'll be seeing more of. Ian Holm pops up. I actually didn't realize until after the movie when I looked it up online that he's dead, and that, you know, this is like the latest in the kind of Carrie Fisher resurrecting a dead actor for a movie. This one goes like animatronic rather than CGI. With CGI, you can get like near photorealistic, but because you can't get literally, like if you look at like what do they do? Peter Cushing, I think they did in one of the Star Wars. They're like very, very close. They did it with Mark Hamill, I think but he's not dead, but they did young Mark Hamill in that TV show, Boba Fett TV show, whatever it's called, Mandalorian. I think it was in that. And it's like, what's the point of getting 99% of the way there when the missing 1% might as well be like the Atlantic Ocean in terms of like, if we don't interpret it as an actual human, then the matter that you got 99% of the way there. I actually prefer this Ian Holm thing where it's wildly off, but you're kind of appreciating the hokey old school practical effects, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall, like that kind of thing. And it works especially well here because, well, it works in both this and Total Recall actually, because it's ultimately not supposed to be a real person in a way. In this case, he's kind of all smashed up and he's falling apart. But it was an interesting thing anyway. I mean, they certainly got the voice right. To me, it was Ian Holm's voice, which nowadays with like machine learning, generative AI and all that, it's probably not that hard to simulate someone's voice perfectly. But yeah, interesting choice. Now, I haven't seen Alien or Aliens for a long time, so I actually can't connect the dots in terms of like what makes sense in terms of like a narrative through line, the timeline of Alien and Ian Holm's character and stuff like that. But I love that this film didn't ask me to have a PhD in Alien timeline. This is like, of course I have seen all the movies and I've seen them multiple times, so I can't really say from my own personal experience that this movie works, having never seen any Alien movies. Probably doesn't quite, I wouldn't say quite goes that far, because, you know, when you see the face huggers in those like suction things, like seeing that without knowing what they are would just be such a different experience. But yeah, for the most part anyway, I think it's pretty self-sufficient. Certainly, you don't need to be thinking about the other Alien movies as you watch it. You're just enjoying this movie, which is really good. And Tasha mentioned the face huggers and how like that scene where they have to like match the temperature of the room to their body temperature, and then they can't get too excited. Just all of these intense scenes. Yeah, this is, I think, what comes from bringing in a incredible horror director into this franchise, which I don't know if has been done before. I mean, Fincher he makes thrillers, but he's not like a horror director like Wes Craven or whatever. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is certainly not remotely a horror director. And Ridley Scott, I wouldn't say is a horror director either. I mean, Alien is a great horror movie, but if you look at his career across the board, I can't think if there's any other horror films really. So bringing someone in where like that's their bread and butter, that's what they do, and then combining that with like the kind of ingredients that make up an Alien movie, as Tasha said, you get some incredibly intense scenes, and yeah, just a really, really good time, the whole movie for me. And she also made a great point about the baby, the baby coming out of her in this aggressive, unplanned, brutally violent way, then kind of instantly growing up and attacking her. That it's there. There's kind of conjures up or evokes that concept of an unwanted pregnancy as a result of a sexual assault. And what I think is great about this film, well, one of the things clearly that I think is great about this film, is how much it explores sexual stuff. It's not even sex. It's just like, genitalia and reproduction and abortion and like just so many different things without ever making it like locked into one interpretation. I think there's so much stuff you could think, and I think it all comes back to H.R. Geiger or Giger, however you pronounce his name. He brought in all of that sexual motif and iconography, but with this surreal, hard to pin down side to it. And the whole franchise is about reproduction, impregnation, rape, like the whole franchise, life cycle, death, rebirth, like evolution, body autonomy. Like there's so much stuff there, but like it's so like, and this is great to get this in a blockbuster franchise. I mean, how many, like, Fast and the Furious franchise doesn't have some like really interesting, endless well subtext that you can keep on playing with in interesting ways. Like, it's great that it's there, and it's also great that this film doesn't kind of firmly put its flag down and like, this is how we're making this statement, or this is how we're interpreting this. It just gives you constant visuals and like ideas that if you want to think about that, or if that evokes that and that makes you think about aging or whatever it might be, then go with that. But if you just want to like be afraid of someone running down a corridor or chasing someone, we're 100% going to let you just have that experience with it. So yeah, great in that regard. I think the introduction of the like deliberately evolving humanity further, this Weyland-Yutani corporation that we've seen in all these movies and that have like you know, the all the Alien movies are so lefty, like maybe not all of them, but I feel like there's like a strong foundational anti-corporate skepticism that's in the early movies, and it still is clearly surviving today. There's so much in this movie about like the synthetic character when he gets the chip in his head that makes him now only act in the interests of the company, and how like just how inhumane that makes him, and how like how at odds that is to just like anything that someone who has a freaking ounce of humanity would care about. And then the bit where Ian Holm kind of pictures this, that he's come up with this incredible elixir or whatever it is that just it corrects it helps humanity. This is like the music. I can't remember the music, but I'm imagining the music is like positive, and I'm actually becoming convinced, because it's that classic corporate thing of like, this is good, this is going to help, we're doing this for the betterment of society, we're your saviors. And he's pitching it to them. They're kind of, should we trust this guy? But also he's showing us video of rats coming back to life, and like he's giving us so much collateral. He's speaking so earnestly that maybe it's real. Maybe this is good, and maybe the Weyland Yutani Corporation is actually not that bad. They do care. They care. And I'm getting convinced as a viewer. And then when you see the fucking monstrosity that they're like, basically go, we only care about humans being able to like effectively mine. Like we don't care about them losing everything that they value about themselves and just like evolving into something that's just a pure functional unit slave to us. It's just like perfectly fits in with the rest of the Alien franchise, and of course is a callback to Prometheus, which I think is good. I like when a franchise has to kind of answer to all of its baggage in a way, as much as sometimes a retcon can be healthy. Sometimes a franchise reaches the point where it's like, okay, let's just start from scratch, and that can be good. But there's also something kind of cool about watching a franchise just have to reckon with its shabby, like crudely put together baggage. I always think this about like the comic industry, where you've got like in the 50s or 60s, wherever, you got people like Stan Lee who are just like haphazardly throwing together these comics, going like, well, he's Batman. He's got to have an assistant with him, because the other character has an assistant with him. What also flies? Bird, Robin. Robin. He's got a red outfit. So call him Robin. And then, what do we need? We need like a little guy's called Ant-Man. And it's just like this chaotically made up shit. And then you've got like 100 years of writers having to go, okay, how can we make this? How can we include this, but like have it fit in with this dark and realistic version of okay, maybe he's called Joker because this, and you know, this traumatic thing, and you know, you get down to the point of like you're making like a Taxi Driver style movie about Joker, and that's kind of what this film has to do in a way. But it never, to me at least, it never feels bloated. It never feels like it's going to buckle under the weight of what's come before, and it's a nice clean palate cleanser. I'm they called it Alien Romulus, and I was like, the space station is Remus and Romulus. Wouldn't the sequel to this be Alien Remus? But at the end they get in the little pod things, and they head off into space. So be interesting to see what the plan is here going forward, if there is one. I know that this one was originally conceived as a Hulu movie, which is like what a fucking height the franchise has fallen from, where we're planning, like, there's a new Alien movie in production, and the plan is for it to be direct to Hulu. Then they decided to release it theatrically, and I'm not sure. I haven't like checked the timeline, but I wonder, did they film it like sort of finish principal photography and go, this is actually pretty good. This could work on the big screen. Let's release this, and maybe let's inject a little bit more money into the post production. Now I don't have a clue if that's what happened, but I'm just curious because it feels very cinematic. I did look up the Box Office Mojo worldwide gross of 2024, and it's number 17, which is not, to me, that feels pretty low. Like, seeing the film like this, I enjoyed it so much. I felt like it was, I can't think of another blockbuster I've liked this much in a long time. Maybe I'm just like kind of very in the bag for this kind of movie because I've grown up watching the franchise and stuff. But it made, like, what was that that movie? Was it Anyone But You? That rom-com that came out with Glenn Howerton. That was number 16, and Alien Romulus was number 17. If it's in that, it's not in the like Inside Out 2 is number 1, Deadpool Wolverine was number 2. It's not in that juggernaut camp. It's more in the like smaller little movie camp in terms of its gross. So I don't know if that aligns with the expectations they had for the movie, or if that's considered a commercial failure. If they were originally planning it to be direct to Hulu, then I don't know. Who knows what the expectation is now for the Alien franchise? But for me personally, after seeing this film, I would really be happy to see Alvarez come back and make another one. And yeah, moving on to the last voice note there from Alan, he mentioned those callbacks to the first two movies and to Prometheus. It makes me want to watch the first two movies again. I've seen them so many times that this year, when I was like, you were watching all of the Alien movies, and I jumped in for Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, because first two I've seen millions of times. Well, I don't know, millions. I've seen them a good few times. I've seen them in the cinema and all that. And Prometheus and Covenant, I guess I've seen recent enough. And also, I don't really feel like they're connected, super connected. They're kind of like spin-off extracurricular activity. And then the only one I haven't seen is Alien vs. Predator Requiem. But I thought the first one was so bad that I thought, you know what, I'm done with that. Now the completionist in me makes me kind of half consider watching that movie. But yeah, I think a huge amount of what Alien is just like so embedded in our conscious light. That it's so often referenced that you can definitely sit down and watch Romulus and be like, okay, yeah, that's from Alien, that's from Alien. I agree with Alan that when he said sometimes the callbacks are too on the nose, and he mentioned "Get Away From Her, You Bitch" as being an example of that. That is the only one I spotted, but it was pretty bad because that actor had done such a good job, and that character was so good, and that line is so wildly outside of what that character would say or what that actor, the wavelength he was operating on. It was just like, it was almost like one of the studio executives happened to walk onto set that day and be like, oh, after you kill that alien, say, "Get away from her, you bitch," and Alvarez has got his head in his hands, like, oh, Jesus Christ. Well, okay, let's play the political game here. Yeah, it really didn't work, that moment for me. But great sequence. I love a good elevator sequence. And I love most of this film is tight. It keeps on finding good sort of set pieces, good situations to put people in. The plot isn't super convoluted. It all makes sense. What people's motivations and their actions are makes total sense. I just think that like Alien and Aliens are just so groundbreaking and almost like take it to another level, that this film, which is kind of like a mixture between those two movies, kind of it doesn't go quite as far into like best horror movie of all time territory that Alien goes, and it doesn't go into best action movie of all time territory that Aliens goes to. But maybe that's just like nostalgia, and maybe they're like just maybe they shouldn't be so untouchable in my head. But you know, you see things when you're young, and yeah. And Alan also mentioned the one thing that I noticed and certainly raised an eyebrow to me, that these like incredible fast speed that the alien life cycle moves at. We see the Chinese girl have her chest busted, and little chest buster crawls away, and we must be in the corridor like, 5 minutes later, when a fully grown xenomorph emerges from its cocoon. I don't know if we've ever clearly established what the timeline is. Like, I don't know if I'm not sure if like on some sort of like pedantic nerd level, you could go back and watch the old movies and like accurately say how long it takes them to gestate and fully grow. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But on a sort of intuitive level, like that doesn't really ring true. It just like feels like we've seen so many movies where like they're eggs for ages. They're, it's linked to what we expect from biology, whether it's like plant about life or animal biology or whatever. It's unrealistic because they're aliens. It's completely made up, but it's somewhat tethered to like just organisms growing. And in this, it's like that goes out the window. Could be an editing thing, could be a scene that's been cut out. But because you've got this ticking clock of the space station is going to hit the asteroid belt. I think at the beginning of the movie it's like 36 hours, but then it becomes like 2 hours or something because they go off course or whatever. That probably means that if you're going to have a chest buster and then you want that very same alien to feature in the movie, then you kind of have to mess with it a little bit. So that is something that didn't work for me, but I don't know. I guess I've got a weird relationship with the franchise now where like part of me is going to hold it to some sort of rigor because I've seen how good it can be with the first two movies. And part of me is going to go, well, they've made Alien Covenant now, just like whatever, I'm not going to take it too seriously anymore. So I'm kind of between the two camps in a way. Anyway, loved the movie overall, thought it was stunningly beautiful. And it was also just it was really good fun. I watched it on a Saturday night. Wife went to bed. She wouldn't want to watch it. Too scary for her. So I just was in this situation where like, it's not too late to throw on a movie. It's a Saturday night. Let's watch a big fun blockbuster. And in this age of MCU and, making movies out of like Minecraft and it's just rare that I have fun with a blockbuster nowadays. And I really, really had a lot of fun with this movie. Kind of gave me that old school, what I used to get when I was a kid, of like the big summer fun movie. And I also like that it takes itself seriously. It's not just sarcastic, ironic, taking the piss out of itself, making jokes constantly. It's a pretty serious movie, but it's not dull. I mean, I think that gets a lot of the time. Let's say Dune Part 1, I think would be guilty of this very much so, of like serious to the point of almost gloomy or depressing, or yeah, this is Fede Alvarez. You know, he wants you to be on the edge of your seat with either tension or just entertainment value every second in the movie. So yeah, had a great time with it. Haven't heard your thoughts on it. I'm not sure if you've liked it, and you came to it from this like saga of watching all the Alien movies in a row. So be interesting to hear your thoughts. I haven't mentioned the fact that it's set between Alien and Aliens. So I don't know if you'll remember now, because it's been so long since you've seen the movie, but how did you feel it worked as a piece of connective tissue between those two movies? Or do you think that's just kind of not particularly important? But yeah, great flick.
Hey man, I'm glad you done the heavy lifting with that long voice note. Very informative and lots of things I agree with. And I'm especially glad you done the heavy lifting because it's so long since I've seen it and still have a bit of a flu or whatever. Probably sound a bit better now than the first voice note, to be fair. Yeah, you mentioned that it's set between Alien and Aliens. And how did I feel about that when you ended your voice note there? I mean, not only is it set between Alien and Aliens, the alien on the Romulus station is the alien that Ripley fires out of the airlock as well. So I think we're at this point in film history where movies like Die Hard, Terminator, Predator, and Alien, they've been put through the ringer so much, and Jurassic Park, I guess, that they've been put through the ringer so much that it might as well be a direct-to-video DVD you might have seen at Blockbusters years ago. If you're someone who doesn't have the relationship that we have with it, obviously they're the movies of our childhood and the real powerhouses of our childhood. But if you're coming in now as a teenager, and what does Alien mean to you? Doesn't mean anything. Like, they're old movies. And then the ones that were new-ish, like Prometheus, which I enjoyed, and Covenant, which is absolutely terrible, but they're pretty forgettable, nothing movies anyway. They don't have that gravitas. So it's interesting to grapple with that question. What does Alien and these franchises mean in 2025 or 2024 when it came out? And I feel like recently on YouTube I saw this clip of all the McBain movies, all the McBain clips from The Simpsons, and then people were like, if you construct these together in the order, the writers made a story, and they do that on purpose. And I read further into the comments, and the writers actually said, no, it's just pure coincidence. And it's like, if you put enough of genre tropes into a sequence, it just becomes that genre. And I think when movies have been, franchises, should I say, have been going for as long as they have, like Terminator, Die Hard, and Predator, they almost become micro genres. I guess, what is a franchise? Only a micro genre to an extent. And that's why when we get lines like that one that felt off, get away from her, you bitch, or whatever that line was, it might feel a bit jarring, and that's why when Ian Holm's head pops up, it's jarring to me. Like, I feel like these movies are constantly stuck within their own genre. For instance, I was watching Die Hard over Christmas, and we all remember Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfucker. Well, I had forgotten in the first Die Hard, that's a reference to, I could be wrong, but he mentioned some Western star like Buck Rogers or something. He used to say Yippee-Ki-Yay. So Alan Rickman's like, "Are you a cowboy, Mr. McLean? Are you a cowboy?" And that prompts him to talk about Buck Rogers or whoever the fuck he's talking about. Maybe Buck Rogers is from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I can't remember. But anyway, that's where that Yippee-Ki-Yay comes from. And when he says Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfucker, like, that's very organic, actually, in Die Hard 1. And then later on, in all the other Die Hards, he's saying Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfucker, because he is now, and the movie and the franchise is a victim of its genre. Like, on one level, that's what people want to see. On another level, that becomes the franchise. Well, we have to have these things. We have to have Annie saying, "I'll be back." We have to have these things. And I think that is what really hurts movies once they try and keep them going again and again and again and again. And I think, what's his name? Fede Alvarez? Let me check. Yeah, Fede Alvarez. I think what he manages to do in this is absolutely fantastic. And it's probably the way to go if you want to continue these micro genres. And how he does that is, well, what are these movie tropes? What are these staples of the micro genre? And that's xenomorphs. That's aliens spitting acid. That's what everyone expects. Okay, well, I'm going to look at this and I'm not going to give you the same thing again. I'm going to give you those elements that you've come to see, but at the same time, I'm going to totally innovate them. So that's why when we get those sequences like the thermal heat and how the xenomorphs react and they're walking through it, we're used of these xenomorphs. Maybe the xenomorphs is the alien. It's the space huggers, isn't it? The face huggers. We're used to them being frantic and attacking like crazy. Okay, let's slow that down. Let's completely flip that on its head. It's almost like what Terminator 2 does. You expect Arnie to be the bad guy. Okay, now he's a good guy. And it's just these things that really good directors do. And again, with Alien and Aliens. Okay, it's one alien. No, aliens. Where they manage to give you your fix of that genre, but turn it on its head, but in a really good way, because in many cases it's done really badly. And Fede Alvarez has the intelligence, he has the creativity, he has the vision to really invigorate a franchise that has been going for so long. It should be dead. And he gives it to us a few times. He gives it to us again in that acid sequence. We know all about the acid. We know how deadly it is. We know how hard it is to kill an alien. And we know we've all had these sequences of the alien going through their acid, going through layers of the ship. Okay, let's give a sequence where the alien's acid is on display, but now I'm going to add in zero gravity and I'm going to play with that. So it's something familiar but completely different at the same time. I was blown away by these set pieces, and seeing it in the cinema was absolutely fantastic. And like Graham mentioned, the sound design, just it's pure blockbuster fodder as well. When you see it on the big screen, this is a movie that gives you that feeling from the 90s when you come in and you're not so much cinema savvy, and you're just putting on a movie and you just come out feeling exhilarated. And this movie certainly does that. And it certainly manages to burst out of, no pun intended, but burst out of the micro genre convictions. Now, saying that, I love the film, really enjoyed it. I did have problems with it. I really like Kaylee Spaney. Again, I'll figure out how to pronounce her name someday as well. I think I felt like she didn't have the star power as a lead in this type of movie. I was surprised. I'm a big fan of her in Priscilla. I'm a big fan of her in Civil War, but I don't think she had the gravitas and the believability. Maybe not the believability, but certainly the presence was lacking towards me. Now, I completely agree with your points that you do care at least about her, and the setup of these people leaving this absolutely indentured servitude because they've been screwed by the corporation is a story you can get behind. I also actually agree with Tasha when she said that the teen element of this movie was a bit off-putting. Maybe you watch a lot of horror movies. Well, in fact, I know you watch a lot of horror movies, and that's why you're more tolerant of it and thought it was great, or thought it was the passing of the torch. For me, this is very much a continuation of the genesis of movies like Maze Runner, Hunger Games, this type of, is it called tween? I don't know. There's a genre of books or whatever that it's. There's a certain type of name for it where let's just get the kids involved, and it very much did seem like, not to say the screencast on a spaceship, because obviously they didn't talk very much like the screencast, but more something like the Maze Runner cast on a spaceship, or these type of young adult novels. That's what I'm saying. These young adult novels, and I don't particularly mind, and I don't particularly blame them, because how else are you going to get people interested in the franchise to stale without getting these young stars on board? But yeah, it just felt very cheap and very studio executive way of, we need to make him younger, we need to get the kids, we need to get him talking that way and acting that way. And yeah, it was probably the least interesting part of the film to me. I agree with David Johnson. The Not a cyborg, what do they call him again? My head is all over the place because it's called this, what are they called? Android. When I first saw him, he's so cookie cutter. Where you're thinking, oh God. And especially how I felt about the teen cast, even though they're not teens, they're adults. Especially how I felt about the cast. Already I'm thinking, oh, here's an android that wants to be treated a certain way, and it's very much of its time, where like talking about identity and this, and I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna get this type of thing, and then no, he does a brilliant duality between being really soft and sincere and protective and an absolute maniac menace who's like being utilized out of his control and with that chip. And yeah, his performance is very good. I actually have seen Roy Lane, and that movie eventually charmed me. And yeah, he's 2 for 2 with me now, Mr. David Johnston. I'm trying to think what else, as it's been a long time, but I think I've been doing a pretty good job so far. Ian Holm. Yeah, I don't think it's just physical effects. I think they use CGI to move his eyes and his mouth, and I think that whole thing is a complete mess and very distracting. And again, where the few times that the movie does fall flat is when they give into that micro genre appeasing, where they have to do these callbacks, or the studio execs are in the building that day, because it certainly out of pocket. It's also mentioned the time it takes for the xenomorph birth. And again, I feel like this is another innovation compared to the tropes we're stuck with in the earlier movies, where I think, like you said, it's never established how long it is, but I do think it's to the plot's betterment that we do get it very quick in the final minutes. And I think we quibbled a lot about the ending of Alien Resurrection. I think this is how you fix that movie and do a much better version of that ending with this type of cinema. I at the time thought it was half Prometheus and half Alien and half these different things. I can't remember too much now, but surely the fact that it's not the same type of alien would change its incubation time. And surely the fact that the original Alien took so long to burst out because the guy was in a coma as well. So I think there's lots of things that would make it fine for the different times, how long it takes, because this is a hybrid alien. It's not just a normal alien. This is a half Prometheus. Although when I was looking that up at the time, I can't find any information that it's a half Prometheus. I don't think it is, but it certainly looked like the design of a half Prometheus, half alien looking thing. But maybe people have confirmed or denied that, because obviously I've seen it when it first came out, but certainly not the original type of alien. And if I remember correctly, I think it smiles as well, which is, maybe it doesn't smile. Maybe I'm getting confused now, but maybe I'm getting confused. I've seen so many other alien movies around those time, but I seem to remember it smiling. And I think that indicated the first time a lot of pleasure is taken from hunting with these creatures, but that might be complete confusion with a different movie, because I remember I saw about 6 of them at the time. And yeah, it is a shame. Well, it's not a shame because thankfully it was avoided, but yeah, it's devastating to think this movie could have been released on Hulu and not got a cinematic release. And the same thing happened that happened Prey, because I think that was straight out on download and streaming, and that never got a film release as well. So I am glad that they did make that decision to put it on in the cinema. Oh, and apparently the idea came from the younger cast and the younger setup, as well as that there was the original idea for Aliens about the kids of the people who lived on the bases before the Marines show up and things like that. So I think that's where the genesis of that is. As far as I know, this is meant to be a standalone film, and based on the box office figures you gave, it doesn't seem like it set the world on alight. But I'm just reading here that Fede Alvarez has a few ideas for a sequel, and he also said he's open to directing a third Alien versus Predator movie. Now, I would give him the keys to the kingdom after this. And in fact, Prey and Alien Romulus are both very good. So yeah, I would let the Alvarez and I think it's Dan Trachtenberg keep on. I would give them the keys to the kingdom going forward, because they've both shown that they have what it takes to invigorate the formula, especially Fede Alvarez in this. So yeah, very good, very impressed, very good time. Glad you finally got to see it. Sorry, this is a slightly tangential, but I was just looking up Dan Trachtenberg there, and he done Prey in 2022. So there's 2 Predator movies coming out this year, right? Predator Badlands in November 2025, right? But he went and shot a secret Predator movie simultaneously or during that time, which is also going to be released this year. Now, we'll see if that comes out, but he actually shot it in secret. So you wonder if that's the one I'm really excited about, this untitled Predator film, because I think, wasn't it X and Pearl were shot around the same time in the same location. So maybe Dan Trachtenberg was on set, had time on his hands, and just became inspired by this maybe smaller scale Predator story while he's out filming somewhere else. Very interesting. But yeah, sorry, I just read that now and wanted to put it somewhere before I forgot.
Hey man, stunningly beautiful winter's morning. Actually, snow on the ground. Heading out to the office. Just listening through to your voice note there. My phone's been acted up a bit, so hopefully this message doesn't cut out at some point. But I've actually never seen the new Prey movie. In fact, I've not seen most of the Predator movies at this point. I've obviously seen the original many times, and I've seen Predator 2 once, which I think is an interesting movie, and kind of like our conversation here on Alien Romulus, it's a big swing, it's a big switch up. But I think that's as far as I've gone, except for Alien versus Predator. So there's a couple there, probably about 3 that I've missed. Maybe when these new Predator movies come out, that'll be my opportunity to catch up. And in terms of like the secret movie that you're referring to, yeah, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of interesting in the sense of like, well, like Pearl, if he's made it in secret, then it's maybe more of a passion project. Maybe it's like, oh, I really wanted to like grab this extra thing that I cared about, that maybe like I got the studio to pay for the big safe project, but I had this like weird little idea that I can only do sort of pro bono on the side. But then on the other hand, I much prefer X to Pearl. And, you know, I think maybe Predator movie benefits from a lot of resources. Anyway, we'll see. It is interesting. It's always interesting when directors kind of do something like that, like just squeeze in an extra movie with the same budget or very little extra budget. Yeah, just going over some of your points that you raised there. Starting off with the sort of yippee-ki-yay syndrome. In the first movie, it makes total sense, and then it's just it's a hallmark of the series, and they kind of have to do it. "Get away from her, you bitch," is one of the best lines in the franchise history. In that moment, it's obviously not written to be particularly memorable. It was just like what Ripley would say in that moment. That kind of perfectly, it's the perfect release of all of the energy, all of the tension, all of the like building animosity that she's had with the Queen. And now, obviously, when you see it pop up in Romulus, we've got to the point where it just completely breaks the fourth wall, and yeah, was probably the weakest point of the whole movie. I think you probably agree that Alvarez has not indulged in that much across the movie. Like, you could obviously, if you're overly cynical, you made the argument that the entire movie is fan service, that the entire movie features facehuggers and xenomorphs and, proximity sensors and a crew of blue-collar workers and a claustrophobic, remote space station. Like, it barely has an original bone in its body. It is just like Alien. Alien meets Aliens, I would say. But I think if you accept that as like, well, of course there are commercial pressures involved. Of course, that's going to be the case. It's not laden down with references that take you out of it. And the references that I did pick up on didn't take me out of it. It wasn't like, oh, that's a joke. That's like, we're supposed to laugh in recognition there. It's more like, no, you're just putting in cool stuff from the Alien franchise. So in terms of like walking that line, I think it's about as good as it gets, really. You mentioned that you and Tasha both felt, or at least you said, at least for yourselves, that kind of young cast, which you refer to as a teen cast, evokes things like Maze Runner, Hunger Games, that kind of YA type of movie. It's interesting because it'd be interesting to expand on that, like why that gets you there, because they're not a teen cast. Like they're in their 20s. I think the android is in his 30s. They are the age that these characters would be, just like younger minors. It's not like some specific dystopia where they have children working in the mines. I mean, they probably do have children working in the mines, but these characters, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, I don't think it's ever really clarified, but my interpretation of these characters, because of their behavior, because of their roles, because of their lives, was that they were the adults of this world. They're the age of the actors, which was like mid-20s. Now, as I said, if you see people like actors in their mid-20s on screen, that usually means you're watching a movie about teenagers. So normally when I see faces like these, I understand them to be teenagers, but that's because normally they are playing teen characters. It's a teen slasher, or it's a high school movie or something. I can imagine most of these cast members walking off the set of Romulus straight into a high school movie as their next gig. So visually, I can see how we're used to seeing these people and seeing them as characters who are teenagers. But I don't think this movie ever gives us the impression, well, obviously it's given you the impression, but I don't think it ever gave me the impression that I was watching a cast of teenage characters. I again saw this as one of the only films I've ever seen on this scale that features a 20-something cast playing 20-somethings, which is a weirdly specific
accolades to throw at it, but I've always been interested. I've always been very interested in, for example, movies about teenagers where the cast are teenagers. So Eighth Grade is an example of that. The film Kids is an example of that. And it's incredibly rare, surprisingly. You might get an 18-year-old, you might get a 17-year-old, but like if a movie's about a full ensemble cast of like sort of 15, 16-year-old people, guaranteed they're all going to be like 21, 22. And there might be one who was like 18 or something. So whenever it happens, I'm always like, oh, it's almost like a unique film experiment. It's that rare. And in this case, this is a rare case of a big giant blockbuster about 20-somethings that are played by 20-somethings, not played by people who are like 33. Now, obviously that is not the interpretation that you got or Tasha got. I think the acting, the dialogue, everything like that seemed to scream teen to you. And it didn't to me. I guess like these people were consumed by responsibility. Like they're not playing. Their lives aren't, it's not like they're being ripped away from a life of childhood play to then have to get involved with something more serious, like the Harry Potter characters. It was more like, no, they already are. They reminded me very much of the characters from the first Alien movie, in that they are just a bunch of nobody blue-collar workers. And they're, you know, in the case of Alien and Alien Romulus, they've absolutely no interest in getting involved with anything like combat or anything like that. They're not like Marines or something. They're doing what they believe to be a completely safe operation. I know in Alien there's the tension of, should we answer the distress call, should we not? But they certainly don't think they're going to go up against an alien. So, yeah, I'd be interested to learn how old the characters from Alien were. I mean, I'm sure that they're older than this, but I also imagine that they're, you know, it's a good spread. I wouldn't be surprised to find that Sigourney Weaver was in her 20s when the first Alien came out, and probably other members of the cast as well. Anyway, it's a shame that you didn't have that experience that I had, because I think if I had seen this and I'm like, they're trying to turn Alien into Maze Runner because they want to sell it to kids, then I'd be like, that probably wouldn't have worked for me that well. Whereas I saw this as like, we're making a new Alien movie in 2024. We've made the artistic decision to have it based around a young cast, but it's not a teen movie, it's not a child movie. And so that kind of worked for me pretty well. Yeah, anyway, you mentioned that the Ian Holmes character is sort of a combination of animatronics and CGI. Yeah, I could tell that there was definitely like a fair bit of digital involvement. It's a weird one where like, it is a dodgy ass effect, right? It looks pretty, I don't want to say bad, because I don't really feel that in my heart. Like I liked it a lot. I like when I'm watching a sci-fi movie, a genre movie, and I see some ambitious, weird effects that they've tried to pull off. I mean, I think a great example of this is the finale of Alien Resurrection, which has the crazy looking human aliens hybrid thing, which is, you know, considers Ripley its mother. I like when an effects team takes a big old swing and does something risky that's got a lot of good in it, even if it's also got a lot of bad in it. So it worked for me. I think I would have liked to have seen it be entirely animatronic, but even just how much of it is obviously real, the stuff away from his face, and even just, yeah, I don't know, how kind of goofy it looks, worked quite well for me. I've actually since learned that it's not a AI mimicry of his voice, but another voice actor. So I guess it's an impression, a flawless impression in my eyes, or maybe it's just because it's combined with his visage, but maybe they also altered the voice a bit. Who knows nowadays? What else? Yeah, the ending. You mentioned that I know we had a big debate, 6 months ago, whatever, about the ending of Alien Resurrection. And I felt it was fantastic. I thought that monster was like one of the best things the franchise has ever seen. And not just in terms of the way it looks, but also the emotional component to its relationship with Ripley. And how I thought it was fantastic. It looks so grotesque. It's like the height of perversion of biology that thus far in the franchise, and it wants to kill everything except for it loves Ripley, and then Ripley has to kill it, which is really emotional for Ripley. And it's not even real Ripley, it's clone Ripley, and it's taking so much, it's wringing so much emotion and almost philosophy out of a really camp, gory, grotesque special effects action sequence. But for you, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you mentioned in your voice note there that this Alien Romulus finale is like that done right. It's like the better version. Of course I disagree, because I think from what I just said there, you can tell like how enamored I am with the resurrection finale. And I think this one, the character who gives birth to this Prometheus monster thing is one of the least developed characters in the movie. And she doesn't really even have much involvement with it. Like, it breastfeeds off her, which is great, but that's such a fleeting moment. It would have been better, I think, if she was one of the main characters in the movie instead of kind of away from the action the entire time. And if maybe she had had a monologue about her pregnancy, her baby, like what it meant to her and the connection she felt to it. There's just other stuff that they could have done to make that a bit more interesting. But yeah, I like them both, and I like the Prometheus monster. I know it's not really, it's not necessarily easy to establish a through line in your head of like why it looks like the characters from the beginning of Prometheus. With these things, there's two ways you can go about it. One, you can go like get your nerd hat on and like get on the Alien wiki and look up what those Prometheus characters are and where Ian Holm got his like serum from and what's he doing and blah blah blah. And then you can go, it makes total logical sense that it looks like the Prometheus characters because of this. And then the other thing you can do is just like, I'll just assume that that makes sense. To me, it kind of makes sense because they're all in the same franchise, and I'm sure there's some biological justification for it, but I don't really feel compelled to do the math, so to speak. It's just a great visual piece for the end of the movie. And then one last point that you made in your voice note that I wanted to just touch on. You said that it made sense to you that they'd have a different incubation time because it's a different monster, referring to the end Prometheus thing. So that primarily when I was saying that the incubation time, that the life cycle is very sped up in this movie, I was referring to the xenomorph. So it busts out of the chest of the Chinese girl. Minutes later, it's a full-size xenomorph. We've just seen this monster that spanned the entire franchise right from the first film. We've seen it so many times. We've seen its life cycle. We've seen its reproduction and its impregnation of humans and all this stuff. And yeah, you can say like in the first movie, he's in a coma and stuff. But I think we've just seen enough movies now to have a bit of a read on how long it takes to do its thing. Not a clinical, it takes exactly this amount of time, but just like it's never felt like it broke absurdly away from insects and stuff like that that do, you know, that, or anything across the animal kingdom that like has in different ways of incubating and gestating and doing this, that, and the other. It's sometimes sped up for the convenience of a movie, but it's not like, it never has made me go, how could that ever be possible? And when it goes from little tiny chessboard buster to full-size xenomorph in literally a couple of minutes, that makes me sort of go, that doesn't even fit in with, I can't even imagine watching that, like sitting down and watching that. What would that look like? Now the fact that the Prometheus monster thing goes from a little baby, like a little fetus, to this giant, massive, towering monster in, 30 seconds or something. You can make the argument that we've never seen that monster before, but you can also make the argument, or I don't know if argument's the right word, but you can have the response of like, doesn't matter if I've seen that monster before. I just don't think that's good monster design because it's so unintuitive. And if its thing is that it evolves, it ages that quickly, then like lean into that or showcase that or something. Because if we're just supposed to like not even really think about it, which is how I kind of interpret it here, then that's sort of weaker and doesn't really follow what we've seen across the franchise so far, which is like a really interesting relationship with biology and science in general. So anyway, minor quibble for me there, didn't really hurt the movie, but it was something that one of the voice notes there, one of the listener contributors mentioned. And when I heard it, I was like, yeah, that I definitely picked up on that the life cycle, the gestation, everything is radically sped up in this movie. But the movie is not necessarily in real time, but it's pretty damn close to that. Anyway, my train's pulling into the station now, so I'm going to end this voice note and head off to the office. But great movie, and I hope we get more from Fede.
Hey man, just getting back to your voice note there. You said to me, can I elaborate on my comments about the feel of the quote unquote teen characters in Alien Romulus? And my answer to that is, short of going back and watching the movie from about 5 months ago at this stage, I cannot. But what I will say is, I'm not saying they are teen characters or I thought of them as teens, but there's a certain type of, I don't know, infantileness of dialogue and characterization that has infiltrated probably mainstream movies. I think that's in conjunction with, I guess, the demographic for who goes to movies. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's just my feeling. And that's what I mean. It feels like people in their 20s, but talking and acting with characterization in a language and a manner more appealing to the communication habits of teens. There's a certain dialogue, there's a certain style of facial acting and tics and things like that that I feel is prevalent. And again, this is a long time ago now. Definitely felt it at the time, and I agree with Tasha's voice note as well, because I remember feeling it strongly at the time also. But at the moment, it's remnants of that feeling rather than a clear difference, because again, this is a long time. So that's the best way of articulating that. Now, it's interesting as well where you're talking about the blue collar workers of the first Alien. I'm not 100% sure how many of them were blue collar workers. I think a lot of them were scientists as well. I think what you might be remembering, unless I'm misremembering, which could also be happening, is the first Alien treats people like they're employed. Like space is so fucking mundane because it's been around for a while. So I feel like there's only a few. Henry Dean Stanton and the guy who plays Barney are the real blue collar workers of that ship. And in this, it's a nice, in Alien Romulus, should I say, it's a nice framing, and it's a nice getting us behind the gang where we see them to begin with. And you're right, we don't really see much of the communities of the colonies in the other movies, which is fantastic. I mean, it's a fantastic addition to this movie. And it makes you hope a little for an Alien TV series that they might go down that route as well. So it does frame it well, and that gives us enough to root for these people for sure. Want them to have a happy ending and want them to accomplish their goal, and that's all that's needed. I didn't really have a big problem with the teen aspect overall, and I'm not even saying it's an artist, it's a corporate choice. Probably Fede Alvarez has an artistic choice for it, but there's a bit of push and pull with that where some of the dialogue is and just the style of acting is very, yeah, like I said, very young adult. But at the same time, that type of acting is very prevalent in a horror movie setting as well, like, because it usually actually is teens. So maybe he's drawn to that from an artistic level as well. I'm not suggesting that he wasn't. But yeah, like you, regardless of a few minor quibbles we've talked about in length, that it's a very, very enjoyable movie.
Yeah, we always end up talking about the quibbles, or rather the disagreements, and it's like we slightly disagree on this one thing, and then we end up talking about that way more than shining a light on all of the like things that we love, like that we both love about it, or that we both kind of shared observations. But it is interesting that we've come down on different ways, and I think we've kind of that what you're saying about like there's this prevalence of 20-something actors communicating and representing themselves in a way that is very teen-like, or kind of harmonizes with the way that teens express themselves and stuff. That's not a trend that I picked up on, but also I don't really have my finger on the pulse of blockbuster cinema or like kind of mainstream cinema as much anymore. On the blue collar thing with Alien, so you're much more well versed in Alien currently because you've seen it in the last year, and I haven't seen it for probably going on 10 years, if not literally 10 years. I think it might have been in the cinema early days of dating my now wife, then girlfriend, and we've been together for over 10 years. So that that it tracks that it's been that long since I've seen it. And maybe you're right. Maybe there's a kind of more scientists or equal science. I guess it's probably what you said, that they feel like employees. What they feel, and this is again going back to like an older memory, but in my head, they very much feel like regular people, just regular citizens. And 9 times out of 10, if you watch a sci-fi movie or a big special effects movie, the characters in it are special people. They're the heroes of the world. They're the best of the best. They're the like most important people within that world or universe in a way, or at least within their field or something. Whereas Alien just feels like, well, anyone could have been driving by. Like that spaceship just happened to be driving by. I don't know if driving is the right word, but passing, and they heard that beacon, and I like that. You know, it's a little bit reminiscent of Die Hard. Now, when over the years, Bruce Willis's character, John McClane, has achieved this legendary superhero status where he's basically like Batman or something. Like he's the most formidable force in the world, essentially. But if you take away all the sequels and you just go back to that first movie, like one thing that was appealing about it was like, yes, he was a cop. Like he wasn't just an average citizen, but he was just a random cop, like an average nobody cop in a way. Even when they find out that there's a cop there, it's like it isn't considered to be like, oh, they're up against a cop. It's just like, what the fuck is this guy doing up there? Like both the other police and the villains are both like, they continue to underestimate him, and I think that's just something that's a nice callback in a way that this movie has. And you mentioned the prospect of a TV show. There is a TV show on the horizon, isn't there? The guy who made Fargo, I think, is making a show set on Earth. I don't know when it takes place. When I was like looking at Wikipedia after this to see just various things like alien related, one of the things that I noticed was a timeline, and the timeline is of every piece of alien media, including video games and everything. And most of it I'm unfamiliar with because it's like novels and comics and, you know, whatever. But the first thing in the whole chronology is a short, or like, it's almost like a fake TED talk. I mean, it's not almost like that. It literally is. It's called like TED 2023 or something. And it's a TED talk by, I guess, Whalen, who's the Guy Pearce character from Prometheus. It's a TED talk by him broadcast in 2023. And I've got a feeling it was released around the time of Prometheus. In other words, 2023 was the future when it was made, because I guess Prometheus came out in like 2016 or something. I'm not quite sure when it came out, but it's interesting that the vast timeline of the Alien franchise, we're now actually in that. Like we've passed through 2023 now, and we're inside the history of the fiction of the Alien franchise, albeit a short. I don't know if that's like a special feature on a DVD or if that was just like put on YouTube to hype up Prometheus or what. But it does make me wonder now when if this TV show is set on Earth, when it takes place, and also will it have aliens? I feel like they have to have the xenomorph characters in it, but I don't know when they get to Earth. Anyway, we'll see. It is probably like, even just thinking about that in that way immediately makes me kind of just exhausted and not really wanting to watch the show. But I do like Fargo. And I think, yeah, the best things, the best movies that this franchise has ever delivered have been like quite simple: Alien, Aliens, and Alien Prometheus. And the worst, I do like Prometheus, the movie, but did I say Alien Prometheus? Alien Romulus. But Prometheus, it's quite late here now. Brain's just in shutdown mode, but Prometheus is all right, but it's still like, it is a bad idea to be like going to, it's actually like the best stuff about Prometheus, or just like, you know, that machine that she gets into to get the alien out of her, and or just general kind of like cool design and action stuff. But the more lore-y side of things, which is greatly expanded on in Covenant, is the least appealing part of the equation. And it feels like TV shows are generally padded out with a lot more lore and world building and stuff. And really what this franchise has done best, in my opinion, is that super direct horror. Like you said, it is essentially like a slasher. It's like a teen, in this case, teen slasher, maybe, but you know, just generally it's like a very tight, contained little horror action thing. And that seems quite the opposite of the Fargo model, which is all about taking something like a simple little crime genre thing and then expanding it out into like an epic saga full of interconnecting generational lore and all that kind of stuff. That's what he's done with the Fargo concept. So yeah, anyway, we'll see where that goes. Yeah, glad to have caught up and talked about it. And yeah, I think maybe next time round, this time around for Romulus, I watched Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection. So maybe in a few years down the line, I'll be watching Aliens, Alien versus Predator, Alien versus Predator Requiem, and then the new one. Then maybe then third in the series, I can watch the Prometheus and Covenant again, do it like that or something.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.